Blair with my contractor extraordinaire, S&S Construction, Mr. Travis Shaw. And we are right now in the beautiful Everson Village area. And I'm going to take you through a process that each and every wholesaler should know. And that's how to estimate the repairs of a property that you're doing a walkthrough on. Travis, let people know a little bit about yourself, your company, and what we're going to talk about today.
Sure, my name is Travis Shaw. I'm a licensed bonded and insured general contractor specializing in rehabs and renovations for investors who plan on buying and flipping and buying and holding. And today we're going to go through the entire process that you need to consider when evaluating the cost of construction for your rehabilitation.
So keep that in mind. This is for all of my wholesalers out there, especially because you are the ones that are going to be doing these walkthroughs when you first walk into a property, when a seller say, hey, come on to my house. So this video is meant to give you a roadmap of what costs to look at and what action you're going to be doing inside this property when you're looking for repairs and stuff that needs to be done. Let's go ahead and talk about this a little bit, Travis.
Sure.
Now, normally when we do the interior work, exterior work, we normally start off the project where? Inside, outside? How would you recommend that investor looking at this project? Should he start looking at the project in regards to cost once he gets inside, or could he do it as soon as he gets to the property?
Well, I would say that you can do it as soon as you get to the property. The first thing that you see is the exterior of the property. And those are the first things that you must consider when considering your renovation cost. And functionality and aesthetics are equally as important in a renovation.
So if we're talking about the first thing we want to do when we first walk up to a property, then I guess we're talking about looking at the actual ground and so on. Is the ground leveled? Do we have to do any type of work regarding the concrete and so on? And on this project, as you look and see, we have some issues. Now, would this be a red flag in your mind as the investor when it comes to the concrete here?
So the concrete here is a little bit in a little bit poor condition. However, this would not be a concern for me as far as the quality and the structural integrity of the home.
Got you. So we looked at the actual walkway. What are we looking at when we're looking at this front of this property?
So it's very important to consider what your buyer is going to be looking at when they look at the property initially. The first thing that we see is the landscaping. We see the siding, which is brick here. We see the shutters, and we can see a little bit of a glimpse of the gutters in the roof.
Okay, now let's break down that process. What does that process of rehabbing this house look like? What do we start off with when we go into the property? And where I'm going with this, demolition, then next phase, and next phase. How would you break that down?
Sure. So the most important concept about a renovation is to stay in key with the standards of renovating a property. So you want to look at demolition.
That demolition is the first stage.
The first stage is demolition.
And when we talk about demolition, what we're talking about?
We're talking about yanking that kitchen out. We're talking about yanking out that old bathroom. We're talking about demolishing that the wood panels that are very often in the basement of Baltimore City row homes and such throughout the whole property.
Now, if the sheetrock is plaster, we want to get that out, rip that out down to stud, or maybe even go further down to brick, depending on the condition of the property. So the first stage we're referring to is the demolition stage. Now, when we're talking about demolition, most of the time, in fact, almost all the time, depending on how much extent the work is going to be, you're going to need a dumpster. What can people expect, or what type of dumpster should they be ordering, what size, and what can they expect to pay for that?
Sure, well, you can expect a 4-yard roll-off dumpster, and you can expect to pay anywhere between $400 and $600 to rent that dumpster and fill it up with the trash.
Okay, so we at the point where we're in the property and they're going to be doing the demolition of the property. So you, as that wholesaler walking in the property, first thing you want to think about is there going to be any costs with demolition and so on. Now, from the demolition phase, what are we going to?
So from the demolition phase, the next thought process is the framing. You want to make sure that everything is going to be prepared for the next following phases, which are the trades.
Okay, so we're framing up the property based on any type of remodeling or any type of upsetting that we're doing with bathrooms, with walls. If we took the property down to stud, now we're going to frame it in and so on. Now, where are we looking at on the cost of the framing? And let's just use this as an example. Sure. Your typical 1,200 square foot house. If we had to reframe this whole house, what are we looking at cost-wise?
We're probably looking at somewhere between $5 to $7 a square foot. Assuming that we have to frame out the basement, we have to do some kind of framing in the bathrooms and in the kitchen, you might want to budget about $2,000 total for framing.
Okay, now, as you just mentioned, we just came from demolition to framing. which trade would you bring in next when you're doing this actual rehab of this property? Would you bring in plumbing, electrical, heating? Which trade would come in next?
So very often the next step that I would bring in would be the HVAC, assuming that the property would need full ductwork. And after that, it'll be plumbing and then electrical.
Okay, so we got HVAC. Typical system HVAC for this type of house. If we're doing gas, furnace, and we're also going to be doing an AC unit, what are we looking at on cost with that?
So if we're looking to do an AC unit with a gas furnace and a full duct installation, you're probably looking somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000.
Now, that includes ductwork or not?
That does include ductwork.
Okay, so $8,000 to $10,000 for the installation of your gas furnace and your AC. Now remember, these are rough numbers, so take that into consideration. We got the AC up and running, we got the ductwork in there. What trade is coming in next?
The next trade to come in will be plumbing. So the next thing I would do is I would have my plumber come in, rough in all the plumbing upgrades that you plan on doing at the property.
Now remember, we're taking into consideration that this is a full rehab. So he's got the plumbing coming in. Plumbing is doing the rough in and getting everything up ready for the next trade, which is
Electrical.
Now, let's break down the electrical. Now, first, let's go back to plumbing. We talked about the plumbing trade. What are you looking at if we had to plumb this whole house?
So in order to plumb this whole house, I would budget somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000, and that's considering that you might have some groundwork to do in the basement. If you're going to put in a French drain, you have to consider cost for that, and also cost for putting a bathroom into the basement with groundwork.
Okay, so you said $3,000 to $5,000,
Yep, and that would include plumbing supply and drain lines.
Now, would that also include some pump if you want to add that in the process and so on?
Sure, yep.
Okay, 3 to 5 for plumbing installation, electrical.
Yep. So electrical, the prices can vary considerably. Electrical, if you want to do a heavy up, or if you just need a standard electrical upgrade.
Tell people what's the difference between a heavy up and a standard.
So a heavy up is when you upgrade the main service panel and the main service line. A standard electrical upgrade, you'd be upgrading outlets, switches, upgrading GFIs, and any other small electrical upgrades that you might need, including light fixtures and lighting.
So let's do a price for both. A standard upgrade cost would be electrical.
So a standard heavy up, you would assume to pay $2,500 for the new service panel, assuming that you want to go to 200 amps with a new service line. A standard electrical upgrade with outlet switches and light fixtures, without materials, you're looking at about $700.
Okay, now we've gotten all the trades in the project. Next step is?
The next step is when you start to consider your finishes. You start to consider any cabinetry that you want to put in. You start to consider countertops. You start to consider plumbing finishes. You've already got it roughed in, but now you got to consider your bathtubs. You got to consider your vanities. You got to consider any sinks, laundry tubs, and so on.
So if we're talking about your typical 3-2 type of property, let's say this one is 1,100, 1,200 square feet, what are we looking at for kitchen? To upgrade this kitchen, put this in a great rehab condition where we're going to sell this property.
So for a standard kitchen at a property like this with the finishes, you're probably looking at about $6,500 to $8,500, and that'll include granite countertops, that'll include stainless steel appliances, and new cabinetry.
So $6,500 to $8,500 is that number. Now let's take it to the bathrooms. We got 2 full bathrooms in this one. What are we looking at in cost with that?
So with 2 full bathrooms in a standard 3-2 like this, you're looking at about $4,500 to $6,500 to renovate the bathrooms and give it a nice new look, new tile, new tub, new vanity, medicine cabinet, and all the trimming finishes.
Now I know people probably saying right now, well Charles, you're talking about finishing, but you didn't go over in regards to hanging the sheetrock and finishing the sheetrock and so on. So let's cover that cost in regards to how much would you charge in your budget for sheetrock, finishing that up and so on.
So assuming that we yank out all of the plaster and we replace all the plaster with sheetrock throughout the entire unit here, you'd be expecting to pay somewhere between $5,500 to $7,500 for all new sheetrock, and that's taped.
Now, does that include the actual mud and finishing, or is that just hanging and taping?
So that should bring you very close to finishing, and so that will bring you up until the point where you need to paint.
Okay, so we're at the point where we need to paint. We got the cabinets in, we got everything looking great right now, and now we want to take it to the finish line. Let's talk about your flooring, let's talk about your carpet, let's talk about your painting.
Sure. So at a property like this that's about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, you should be looking at somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 for all your flooring needs. That's assuming that you want to do sand and poly on the main level, and then carpet on the upstairs, and then some kind of laminate flooring, or maybe even carpet in the basement.
Fantastic. Now to take it on home.
Okay.
What are we looking at as the last thing? Should we budget any overages. As that contractor on this project, what would you estimate as a good budget for just in case something comes up? 10, 15, 20%? What would you cover for overages?
All right, so right before I mentioned that, I forgot to mention the cost of paint. So to paint this property, you should be looking at somewhere between $300 and $3,500, and that's for a standard 3-color paint tone. When you have the walls a flat color, whatever flat paint, whatever color you choose, you're looking at white ceilings, you're looking at semi-gloss baseboards and trim. But as far as overages and as far as a budget to consider all the things that you did not consider, I always add in 10 to 15% to each budget.
Excellent. Okay guys, as you've seen, we've just broke down what you're looking at from a schematic point of view. And what I mean by that, just if we were to get on the phone and start asking questions about this property, what we're looking at as a cheat sheet for the rehab. Now, let's take the point of view of we're at the property and we're going to go over and walk you inside and see exactly what we're looking for. Let's go inside.